was born deaf, as well as my older sister. And when we were little, we made a drawing together of two worlds, the deaf world and the hearing world. And in between those worlds was a bridge. And this was our ideal world, because this was a bridge that people could use to exchange experiences and communicate without limitations. I grew up in both the deaf and the hearing world, and I noticed that there is a gap between the two. When I was 10 years old, I was at the platform waiting for a train with my dad, and I played with his train ticket, and it said this was an assistance card for a person with a handicap. And I said, "Dad, you bought the wrong ticket." And he said, "No, this is how society views you. You are a person with a handicap." That made me laugh, and I was like, "I have a handicap? I can walk. I'm not missing an arm. How am I a person with a handicap?" Only later, I realized that that is what society views me like because of my deafness. Eventually, I got older. I didn't feel handicapped because when we are among other deaf people, communication is easy. There are no boundaries. We are very proud of our native language, the Dutch sign language. We're proud of our culture. And we can sign and communicate without barriers. I've lost my thread here. So we're very proud of our culture, our sign language, and we also have a shared history. Just for your information, that in Europe and other places in the world, from 1880 until 1980, a period of about 100 years, sign languages have been forbidden in education. If a pupil were to sign, they would get punished. We don't feel like people with a disability, but society poses boundaries for us because it's very hard to communicate with hearing people who don't know our language. It's hard to communicate with hearing people that view us from a perspective that our ears are defining us, the things that we cannot do because of our deafness. And that is the medical view. In 2012, I started working at Greenpeace, and that was my dream job. I was really happy to be offered this job because it gave me an opportunity and I felt like I could be on equal footing with others. But I needed, for 30% of my working time, to make use of the services of interpreters to communicate with my colleagues. But unfortunately, in the Netherlands, the law says that you only have a right to 15% of your working time. So that was a boundary. I went to court, tried to fight the government, but lost the case. That was a really big setback, and I wanted to appeal the case, but unfortunately, laws, regulations don't allow for that in the Netherlands. So that was hard, that the government tells me I cannot work at Greenpeace because this is not a suitable job for me. You can only communicate with your colleagues for 15% of your time. So that made me wonder, am I the person with the disability, or does the society give me this disability? So my contract at Greenpeace wasn't renewed. I had to leave, and I accepted that, and I made a career switch. And I started my own company, Wat Telt, with my sister. And we wanted to make our dream come true. We wanted to connect the deaf and the hearing world. And we became consultants for accessibilities in the culture and arts field. And we started in that field because we, as deaf persons, are very proud of our culture, and we wanted to focus on a cultural perspective. So that is why we started in that domain. That was the best place to start. So we started working, and every once in a while a museum would ask us why we thought that they were not accessible, because, you know, deaf people can use their eyes, they can see the paintings and the objects, and that is a very good question, but it's also a very good illustration of how difficult it is to put yourselves in a deaf person's shoes. Because yes, we can see things, obviously, but it's still very complicated. There is a lack of information because society is very sound-based. All information is based on spoken language, and that's what we miss. And also, just for your information, more than 95% of deaf children are born with hearing families. Their parents then need to learn how to sign, so that already causes a delay in their language development. And that is why the deaf education focuses on language learning rather than culture, so reading and writing, but there's less attention to culture and arts. As a deaf person, when you grow up and you go into a museum, the first hurdle you get to is the desk where you buy your ticket. Because people tend to panic slightly when they meet a deaf person, because they don't know how to communicate with them. And the only thing you want to do is buy a ticket. And that is already a very difficult situation, which doesn't make you feel welcome. And when you then get into the museum, there's many people walking around with headsets and in groups, and that makes you feel isolated as well. And then in the rooms, obviously, there's text on the wall, maybe in Dutch, maybe in English, and that's very hard to read because for many deaf people, Dutch is their second language. Their native language is their sign language. This means that they don't feel at home in a museum. It's really for them a place for hearing people. So in 2015, Wat Telt and the Photography Museum in Amsterdam, we set up this project, Museums in Sign Language, and we've been going on for 3 years now, and we have a network of 16 associated museums right now. And they have tour guides or tours in sign language, and we trained these guides to do the tours. And sometimes people ask me, how many people are there in the Netherlands? Well, there's a large group of about 1.5 million people with some degree of hearing loss. It's a relatively big group, but there's many different forms. There's people who became deaf of noises or old age. A small part of that group is 17,000 people that use a sign language, and that might be a very small group. Yes. But each target audience has an added value, and the same goes for deaf people. If you target this audience, you get forced to think about how to make your communication accessible. Is your information spoken? Is it visual enough? How can you make it accessible in language for this target group? And every target group, small or large, can have an influence on the overall quality of your accessibility. And that's what everybody benefits from. What's important is that you work together with your target group, with deaf people in this case, because then you can work on an equal basis and inclusively towards accessibility. And our museum guides, we have decided to use museum guides, deaf people themselves, so not hearing guides with an interpreter, but we wanted deaf people to do the tours themselves because they are native signers, they are representatives of the deaf culture, and they have an identification with their visitors. And we are very visual. Sign languages are 3D languages, and what they do when they come into the museum is they make 2D flat art come to life in a 3D language. It's very visual, and it's very beautiful to see also for hearing people. It intrigues them. They notice it. And that is a way to make deaf people more visible in society. So that is a positive thing for deaf people to be recognized. Also, when you go into a museum, there's different exhibits, different themes that you can learn from. That means that the information, the lack of information that they have, can be remedied by that. And this empowers them. I do believe that museums are an intersection for different perspectives, different cultures and experiences, and they are a source for new ideas and inspiration. And I think that is the point of museums. That is, they should be inspiring. And I think that museums, when they become more inclusive and accessible, they can be role models for other organizations as well in their quest to an inclusive society in the future. I would like to urge you to abandon your medical view, to look at deaf people from a cultural view, because it's a very rich and beautiful culture, and they have a beautiful, and we have a beautiful language. So talk to us, work with us on an equal basis, inclusively, and maybe in that way, the bridge between the hearing world and the deaf world can really become a reality. Thank you.